My father carried the box himself. This is the detail I have never been able to remove from the memory, not my mother's expression, not the specific words that preceded the carrying, but the image of my father, 51 years old, lifting the cardboard box that contained what they had decided was the sum of my belonging in their house and carrying it to the front door with the specific deliberate care of a man performing a decision rather than making one. My name is Celestine. I am 38 years old. On a Saturday morning in June, when I was 22 years old and had just received the letter that told me I had not been accepted to the graduate program my parents had decided was the correct next chapter of my life, my father carried the box and my mother stood in the hallway with her arms crossed and said, "This is what we have been saying. You make the wrong choices. You will not amount to anything. You need to find somewhere else to do your not amounting." I stood at the door. The June morning was the specific warm of a season that does not care about the human events occurring inside the houses it is illuminating. The front walk was the same front walk I had walked every day for 18 years. The neighborhood was the neighborhood, the specific geographical perimeter of everything my parents had worked to achieve and had organized the presentation of themselves around. It was not a wealthy neighborhood, but it was theirs. That was what they meant when they said everything they had ever called theirs, not the absolute value of the property, but the specific identity that the property represented. The house they had bought in 1989. The block where my father was known. The church 3 streets over. The grocery store where my mother's name was on the good customer list. I looked at the box. I picked it up. I walked to the street. I did not cry. Not from the specific performance of strength, from the particular internal experience of a woman who has just received information she is going to use correctly and who has not yet had time to grieve it because the using requires her full attention first. I was going to build something. I did not know yet what the something was. I knew it would overlook the street. The box had in it 3 changes of clothes, the notebook I had been writing in since I was 15, my grandfather's watch, a photograph of my grandmother, and the specific debris of a life that had been organized around other people's expectations rather than my own. I spent the first night on my friend Reina's couch. Reina was 22 and had the specific quality of a woman who understood, without being told, that what I needed in the first 12 hours was a couch and not a conversation, and who provided the couch and the silence around it with the particular warmth of someone who knows the difference. I lay on Reina's couch and I thought about the notebook. The notebook was the thing my parents had never asked about. It contained, across 7 years of entries, the specific record of a mind that had been observing the world around it with a particular focused attention that my parents had consistently interpreted as distraction. I noticed things. Not the things that the specific social curriculum of my household said were worth noticing: grades, appearances, the management of how we seemed to the neighbors, but the things underneath those things. The patterns. The gaps. The specific places where what existed and what could exist were separated by a distance that nobody seemed to be addressing. I had noticed at 19 that the neighborhood I grew up in had no financial services within walking distance. No bank branch. One check cashing facility with fees that represented a significant tax on every transaction made by someone without access to traditional banking. I had noted this in the notebook. I had noted that this gap existed in 4 of the neighborhoods adjacent to mine. I had noted the number of people I knew who used the check cashing facility. I had noted what they paid. I had wondered, in the specific wondering of a 22-year-old with a notebook and Reina's couch and nothing left to lose, whether there was something that could be built in that gap. I got a job that Monday. Not a career, a job. Administrative assistant at a small insurance company. The kind of work that is invisible when it is done well and immediately visible when it is not, which taught me something about invisible work that I have carried ever since. I opened a savings account. I saved $40 from my first paycheck. It was the first thing I had ever built entirely for myself. The notebook became a plan in year 3. Not suddenly, in the specific incremental way that plans develop when they are being built by someone who has learned, from necessity, to be patient with the pace of things that cannot be rushed. I had spent 2 years adding to the observations I had begun at 19. I had added data, the specific verifiable data of a woman who had taught herself, through library books and online courses, and the particular self-directed education of someone who has decided that the credential is less important than the knowledge. To read financial analysis. I could not afford a formal education. I educated myself in the specific way available to people who cannot afford the formal version, imperfectly, non-linearly, with gaps that the formal version would have filled and with connections that the formal version would not have made. Because the formal version happens in a classroom and I was happening in the world. The plan was this: a community financial cooperative in the neighborhood I had grown up in. Not a bank, a cooperative. Member-owned, community-governed, designed to provide the services that check-cashing facilities provided at predatory cost, plus the savings and small loan infrastructure that the neighborhood lacked. I had never started a business. I had never run a cooperative. I had never raised capital. I had a notebook, 3 years of self-education, $40 a paycheck in savings, and the specific stubborn attention of a woman who had been told she would not amount to anything and who had decided to find out whether that was true by attempting the specific thing that amounting required. I called Raina. Raina was 25 now and had the particular quality of someone whose loyalty had been tested by 3 years of watching a friend build something from nothing and who had passed the test by continuing to believe in the building even on the days when the building looked like nothing. I need to tell you about the plan, I said. Finally, she said. What do you mean finally? I said. I've been watching you read financial law textbooks from the library for 18 months, she said. I've been waiting for the plan. I told her. She was quiet for a full minute. How much do you need to start? She said. 12,000, I said. I have 4, she said. From my grandmother. That was the beginning. Raina's $4,000 was the most significant gift I have ever received, and I want to be precise about why, not because of the amount, which was significant relative to what we had and not significant in the absolute terms of what the cooperative would eventually require, but because of what it represented. Raina was 25 years old and had received the $4,000 from her grandmother's estate and had been keeping it in a savings account for the specific reason that she had not yet decided what it was for. When I told her the plan, she decided. She did not give it as a loan. She gave it as a belief. The distinction matters because a loan comes with the specific weight of an obligation that can become a burden when things go wrong, and things go wrong in the early stages of everything worth building. A belief comes with the specific freedom of a gift that has already been completed. Raina had already made her decision, and the money was already mine, and what I did with it was the answer to a question she had asked by giving it. I spent the following 6 months completing the plan. Not building, completing the plan. The building would come after the plan was complete enough to build from. I found a community development financial institution that provided technical assistance to cooperative startups. I attended every workshop they offered. I took notes in the same notebook that had been in the box my father carried to the door. I also, in those 6 months, began the conversations. The conversations were the most important part, not the financial modeling, not the regulatory framework, not the governance structure, but the specific patient work of going into the neighborhood and sitting with the people I was building for and asking them what they needed and listening with the complete attention of someone who understood that the most important information about a problem is held by the people living inside it. My grandmother had lived 3 blocks from my parents' house until she died when I was 19. She had used the check-cashing facility every month. She had paid the fees every month. I thought about her every time I walked into that neighborhood for the conversations. She was the reason the cooperative needed to exist. She was the reason I was building it. The first application for a community development loan was rejected in month 8. I want to tell you about this rejection not as a dramatic low point designed to make the subsequent success more meaningful, but as an honest account of what happens when you are building something real. The specific ordinary experience of a setback that does not destroy the building, but reveals the parts of it that were not yet strong enough. The rejection letter cited 3 deficiencies: insufficient operating capital reserve, incomplete regulatory compliance documentation, absence of a demonstrated community engagement record. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in the notebook. Not from anger, from the professional reflex of a woman who had taught herself to treat information as information rather than as judgment. The letter was telling me specifically what needed to be different. That was useful. I called the CDFI Technical Assistance Coordinator, a woman named Brenda who was 54 years old and had been working in community finance development for 22 years, and who had the particular quality of someone who has seen every variety of early-stage failure and who responds to them with the specific productive impatience of someone who does not have time for paralysis. I read the letter. I said, "Good," she said. "Tell me which of the three you can address fastest." "The community engagement documentation," I said. "I have 18 months of meeting notes, attendance records, and survey responses. I didn't know how to format them as a formal record." "Then that's what we fix first," she said. "Come in Thursday." We fixed the documentation on Thursday. We addressed the capital reserve by restructuring the membership fee schedule, which increased the projected initial capital and satisfied the reserve requirement. The regulatory compliance documentation took 2 months because regulatory compliance documentation always takes 2 months. I reapplied in month 11. I was approved in month 13. The approval letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was at my administrative assistant job when it came through on my phone. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I stood in the bathroom stall and I read the letter twice. Then I thought about my grandmother. Then I thought about the notebook. Then I went back to my desk and finished the day because the day was not done and the work was not done and the approval letter was real whether I went back to my desk or not. The cooperative opened on a Thursday in September, 5 years after the Saturday morning my father carried the box to the door. I want to describe the space because the space matters. It was 1,400 square feet in a building on a commercial street in the neighborhood I had grown up in, 3 blocks from where my grandmother had lived. 4 blocks from the check-cashing facility, whose fees had prompted the notebook observation that had become the plan that had become the cooperative. The space smelled of new paint and the particular clean of a room that has been prepared for something. The floors were the original hardwood of the building, refinished. The walls were a warm neutral color that I had spent 2 evenings choosing because I understood, from the community conversations, that the visual atmosphere of a financial institution communicates whether the institution was built for you or merely near you. Raina was there at 7 a.m. before the doors opened. Brenda was there. The 12 founding members of the cooperative, the people who had been in the community conversations, who had helped shape the governance structure, whose names were on the founding documents, were there. The first person who walked through the door at 9 a.m. was an elderly woman named Mrs. Caldwell, 73 years old, who had been using the check-cashing facility for 11 years and who had heard about the cooperative from her neighbor and who came in with a check and the specific careful dignity of someone who was not certain whether this institution was the kind that would treat her well. I served her myself. She opened a savings account. She paid no transaction fee. She left with a membership booklet and a receipt and the specific expression of someone who has just been treated as someone for whom the institution was built. I watched her walk out the door. I thought about my grandmother. My grandmother would have been 81 years old. She would have walked through that door. She would have sat across from me. She would not have paid the fee. I went back to my desk. I did not cry until the building was closed and Raina and I were the only ones left. Then I cried for approximately 4 minutes. Then I locked up. Then I went home. The years after opening were the years that revealed what the building was actually made of. Not the opening is the ceremony. What comes after the ceremony is the truth. In year 1 we served 240 members. In year 2, 411. In year 3, we opened a second location. The second location was 3 neighborhoods over, the same gap, the same pattern, the same invisible financial tax on people who had no alternative. I had documented this in the notebook at 19. I was addressing it at 28. The cooperative was not glamorous. I want to say this plainly because glamour is not what this kind of work produces, and the absence of glamour is sometimes mistaken for the absence of importance. We processed transactions. We maintained savings accounts. We made small business loans to 14 members across 3 years, a catering company, a childcare provider, a alteration shop, a man who had been making furniture in his garage for 20 years and needed equipment. We held monthly financial literacy workshops in the community room. We were not in the newspaper until year 4. A journalist named Sasha, 30 years old, the daughter of a cooperative member, who had grown up 3 blocks from the first location and who wrote the specific kind of local journalism that the national outlets do not cover because it is too specific and too true, wrote a profile. The profile was titled, "The Woman Who Built a Bank for the People Banks Left Behind." I had not been consulted on the title. I would not have chosen it for myself. But I understood what it was doing, not describing me, describing the gap. The gap was the story. I was the person who had noticed it and refused to stop noticing until the noticing became a building. Raina called the morning the profile ran. "They got it," she said. "Most of it," I said. "The important part," she said. "Yes," I said. The profile was read by a foundation that provided capital to community financial institutions. They called the following week. The conversation that followed changed the scale of what was possible. The estate came in year 12. I want to be precise about what I mean when I say estate, not a word I use naturally, not a word that belongs to the vocabulary of someone who grew up in the house I grew up in, but the accurate word for a property of certain scale and position, and it is the accurate word, so I will use it. It sat on a hill. The hill was the specific geographical feature of the area that made it visible from the neighborhoods below, from the commercial streets, from the residential blocks, from the church 3 streets from my parents' house, from the block where my father was known. I had noticed the property at 26, driving past it on the way to a community meeting. I had looked at it the way I looked at gaps, as something that existed in the present tense, but did not have to exist in the same way in the future. I bought it at 34. Not suddenly, the purchase was the product of 12 years of the cooperative's growth, of the foundation's capital partnership, of reinvestment and patience, and the specific compounding quality of something built correctly rather than quickly. The cooperative by then had 7 locations and served 11,000 members, and had made 412 small business loans. The estate was not a vanity purchase. I want to be honest about this, because honesty is what the story requires. The estate was the first home I had owned. Not the first place I had lived. I had rented apartments across 12 years, always modest, always chosen for proximity to the work rather than for comfort. The estate was the first space where I chose what I chose rather than what I could afford. It overlooked the neighborhood. My parents' house was visible from the east-facing windows. I did not buy it because of my parents' house. But I stood at the east-facing window on the first morning, and I looked at the neighborhood, all of it, the full specific geography of the place that had been everything my parents called theirs. And I understood something that the 22-year-old with the box had not yet been able to understand. The something was this: I was not above them. I was looking out for them. The view was not victory. It was responsibility. My father called in year 9. Not the first contact. There had been smaller contacts across the years, mediated by aunts and cousins and the specific social gravity of a family that had enough members to sustain connection even between people who had closed a door. But the first call, that was his voice, his number, his choosing to dial. I answered. He said, "Celestine." I said, "Dad." He said he had read the article. The one Sasha wrote in year 4. He had read it and had shown it to my mother, and they had sat with it. His word was sat, which told me something about how they had received it. Not dismissal. Sitting. "We were wrong," he said. Not about everything. He did not say everything. He said about you. "We were wrong about you." I sat with this. Not the apology, the shape of it. The specific form of a man for whom apology is not a practiced instrument and who is using it anyway because he has decided it is required. "I know," I said. "Your grandmother," he said. "She would have." "I know," I said. A long pause. "The cooperative," he said. 3 blocks from where she lived. "Yes," I said. "You did that for her," he said. I looked at my hands. "I did it for everyone like her," I said. She was the one I could see clearly. He was quiet. "Can we?" he started. "Yes," I said. Before he finished. "Yes, we can." We had dinner at my parents' house that Sunday. My mother had cooked the specific meal she cooked for occasions she considered significant, not every occasion, the ones that required it. This required it. She did not apologize in words. She apologized in the meal. I received the meal. I received the occasion. We sat at the same table where the decision to carry the box had been made. The table was smaller than I remembered. Most things are. Here is what I kept from a Saturday morning and a cardboard box and 16 years of building something from the specific gap between what existed and what should exist. I kept the notebook. Not the physical object, though I still have it, the original, in the drawer of my desk at the cooperative's administrative office, worn at the corners from years of being carried in bags and set on surfaces and opened in the middle of the night when an observation needed to be recorded before it escaped. I kept the practice. The specific daily habit of noticing what other people are not looking at and writing it down without immediately knowing what it means. The cooperative exists because a 19-year-old with a notebook noticed a gap that everyone else had stopped noticing because it had been there long enough to seem permanent. Nothing is permanent. Most gaps can be addressed. The first step is writing down what you see. I kept my grandfather's watch. It was in the box my father carried. It had been my grandfather's and had come to me when he died, and I had put it in the box that morning not knowing whether I would ever have somewhere safe to keep it. I wore it on opening day. I wore it when the foundation called. I wore it the day I signed the papers on the estate. It is not a valuable watch in the market sense. It is the most valuable object I own. I kept Raina. She is 40 years old now and serves on the cooperative's board of directors and has the specific quality of someone who gave $4,000 from her grandmother's estate at 25 and has been watching what the gift became ever since with the particular satisfied attention of someone who made a decision about a person and was right. We have dinner every Thursday. We have had dinner every Thursday for 12 years. She brings the wine. I make the food. We talk about the work and we talk about everything else, and she is the person who is there at 7 a.m. before opening day and who will be there for whatever comes next. I kept the view from the east-facing window. Every morning. Not as triumph as orientation. The neighborhood below. The cooperative's first location visible from that window, a small awning in the distance. 11,000 members. 412 loans. Everything that was not there when I was 19 and noticed the gap. I am 38 years old. My parents said I would never amount to anything. I carried my box to the street. I built the thing that the neighborhood needed. I moved into the house that looked out over everything they had ever called theirs. And the first thing I did was open the window. Not to look down. To look out for them. If this story reached something in you, if someone once told you the size of your future and you went ahead and built a bigger one, I want to hear about it in the comments. What did you notice that nobody else was looking at? Stories like this one stay alive because people carry them forward. Share this with someone who needs it today. And if you would like more stories told honestly, the way things worth keeping deserve to be told, subscribe. We will be here. The end.